there is 6% which is getting contributed from the mining sector. And if you typically categorize some of the other aspects as far as the sector outlook goes, you see that 95% of the scope 3 emissions are from mining, 47, almost 48 million tons carbon dioxide equivalent GHG emission from coal mining, and around 35% share of fugitive methane emission from coal mining again. If I typically segmentize it as per the sector, not only coal, if I look at coal mining sector, it's contributing almost 1% of the total GHG emission, around 50 kgs of CO2 equivalent per ton of coal which is getting produced in the country. Well, when you talk about a very important parameter, which is diesel power HEMMs, you see they contribute almost 15% of the total, this mining production, or rather the mining emissions which are happening in the country. So this consumption of 14% which is getting into the mining is also something which is very closely looked at. The third is when I talk about the energy transition, there is almost or rather 700 grams of CO2 equivalent per unit which is getting produced. So why I'm giving all these numbers? The task which we have in our hand, and we have been talking since the morning about greener initiatives. So this is one area which has to be very critically looked at. This is one area where there has to be a significant push. We understand from the coal logistics report which we prepared that, okay, going from road transport to rail transport, increasing the rail transport will typically reduce these emissions. That's absolutely wonderful. But the fact is, there are limitations. In every mining dynamics, there are a lot of limitations which are also there. So how do we address it? So for that, we carried out one more analysis very recently, and I would just like to debrief on that particular aspect, which is, we looked at the overall HEMM landscape in India. Then we looked into that, what are the alternative for the existing set of diesel running equipment, IC engine, what could be the kind of alternatives for this? And third, we also looked into that, how globally people are looking at it. What are the policies which are there in some of the leading matured mining countries, how they're looking at it? And can we take some aspects from there for us and can leverage that in our country? Yes, there are many. And then we also went to the stakeholders. We started discussing with the stakeholders, the industry people, the miners, the OEM fraternity, the entire ecosystem, and we're looking at their perspective, that how should we look at it. Based on all that, there is a roadmap which has been prepared. It's also in the public domain. But the overall aspect which came up is that there has to be some aspects which are immediate. There are some aspects which are between 2 to 5 years, and then which are beyond 5 years. So let me start with the first one, which is coal, which is close to most of you who are there. I'm presuming that most of you are from the coal industry and the other non-coal industry as well. So looking at coal industry, one thing is for sure that in the next decade, standing today, we are going to double our production, which means we are going to evacuate double of what we are producing today. And that not only means the commodity, but it also means the kind of overburden, the waste handling and everything which is happening in and around it. That will be doubled. And how it's going to get doubled? The first thing is the share of the captive production, not only Coal India, the non-coal Indians are also going to produce, which is around 12% in 2024. It's going to be around 22%, which includes, like my previous speaker mentioned, and NML, they're also growing big time. There are a lot of expansions which are happening in the market. The second is, if you typically look at the mining methodology which is happening in the country and then the kind of contribution, it's very interesting. 56% of the mines are open cast, but they contribute 96% of the production. So this is an interesting fact, because we are heavily dependent on the open cast mining. There is a tremendous push on underground mining as well, and I'm looking at some 125 million tons of number by 2030-31. But I believe that open cast is something which has to be critically looked at. The third is the kind of deployment which is happening in the industry. If you look at the deployment, there are high capacity equipments which are also coming up. And that has been a focus of some of the players who are trying to expand. So what does that mean? That means that shovel, dragline, dumper, tripper, drills, all of them are going to go up by, or rather in a CAGR, varying between 4.5 to 5.7% during the same period. So this is a very interesting fact related to the coal mining industry, that there is a significant expansion in terms of the consumption of HEMM, so in terms of the usage of HEMM also coming up. Let me give you a scenario for, I don't know where it's working. Yeah, sorry. Let me give you a scenario for, like I told you about coal mining. This is a figure which talks about non-coal mining. And if you see the kind of numbers which are there, iron ore is going to get doubled, limestone is going to get doubled, most of the commodities, some of the commodities are going to, they'll be tripling in the next quarter. And I'm not talking about critical minerals because they're typically niche product. But some of these bulk commodities which are happening in the country, they're going to be double in the next decade. And obviously, when they are going to get double, their HEMM consumption is also going to go up. So that means that overall scenario in terms of mining is looking very, very promising over the next decade, which will require a lot of HEMM involvement, which will require a lot of expansions. But this also means that there has to be a push towards the greener initiatives. And when I talk about greener initiatives, what could be the greener initiatives here? The greener initiatives, typically we understand, as I was showing in the previous slide, 15% is coming from diesel running equipments. There has to be a reduction in that. For that, you need alternate fuels. What are the present technology? Well, I'll just go back one slide, and I'll show you that this is the global scenario of decarbonizing mining operations and what could be the various initiatives which are there. And I know it's very difficult to read this slide because there are many such initiatives. But the overall fundamental which I'm trying to communicate from this slide is there is a technology readiness, there is a commercial readiness index. It's a 2 by 2 matrix between these two. And when you talk about technology readiness, there are some technologies which are there. It's a completely evolving industry. Today, what looks non-feasible, today what looks very difficult, maybe tomorrow that's a possibility. So technology is evolving, but technology readiness index is typically on the higher side. But when we talk about the commercial readiness index, we see that some of them are looking commercially viable today, some of them are not looking commercially viable today, but they may look commercially viable in the coming decade. So with that matrix, 5 typically technologies were taken up for that study, which was first, battery electric vehicle. We all commonly know that there are a lot of talk about it. The second is fuel cell electric vehicle. The third is CNG, LNG based. Fourth is biofuel. And fifth is, again, a buzzword in the market, which is hydrogen-based fuel. So what exactly is the kind of scenario? There are all alternatives which have a logic. But then I would like to again take you through a simple comparative. I'll not go into the detail of this slide looking at the paucity of time. But the point which I'm trying to raise here is that if you look at the second last point, which is talking about emission reduction, for some of these initiatives like BEV, this ICE trucks versus a battery EV is kind of 63 to 84% lower in terms of the emissions. That's obviously very attractive. Similarly, when you look at FCEVs or some of these other initiatives, they have the common characteristics. They reduce the emissions. But are they all feasible today? The answer may be no. There are a lot of R&D which is going in the market, but that has to be looked at critically. The suitability of them is also one of the conditions which has to be looked at. When we talk about something like CNG or LNG, it's a fantastic initiative in Canadian operations or some of these Scandinavian operations where you find that, okay, it's a very cold climate where you are going to adopt it. But in Indian scenario, it could be a very difficult scene. So that overall picture, if I try to draw in a very simplistic manner, this is kind of comparative table where you see the green one are favorable, yellow can be favorable, red are not favorable or difficult at this moment. You see that BEV, battery electric vehicles, appear to be the most favorable option as an alternative fuel in the market. It doesn't discount the other alternative fuels which are there because you never know tomorrow which kind of technology is going to come up. Maybe platforms like this are going to support such initiatives. And that is the reason why I am here, because I would like to talk about some of these points which are there happening globally. Yeah. I don't know whether you're handling it, Yellow Man. Oh, yeah, it's coming. Go back. Back. Wait. Go one slide up. Next. Yes, yes, I'll just try to wrap it up. In fact, I'll just wrap it up in next 2 to 3 minutes. Just to, sorry for the technical glitch. This typically happens when we talk about technology. But yeah, the point which I was trying to arrive at is that I have just highlighted 5 countries here: US, Canada, South Africa, Australia, China. They're all matured mining countries, if we put it on a maturity index. And typically for India, they are the countries to look at. And all of them have some or the other clean technology initiatives, greener initiatives for HEMM. But when I talk about the Indian scenario, and this is one such slide which is showing, this is one such slide. This is one such slide which is showing some of the initiatives which have already been taken up, like PM E-Drive, hydrogen, LNG. When you look at all these initiatives which have been taken for commercial vehicle or the HMM segment, you find that there is a lag in terms of the targeted incentives for the HEMM vehicles which are typically used in the industry. So I'll not go into the next slide. This basically talks about the overall summary of EV, how it's happening, but I'll try to talk about the voice of the customer, how the mining players are looking at it. There is a tremendous push from the mining fraternity that what are the top 5 levers to look at when I talk about HMM imports, because we typically import a substantial quantity of HMM. We want to substitute it with domestic production. So what are the things which are going to help us do that? The first is superior technology and automation. Second is high reliability and performance. Longer life cycle and lower TCO. This is also one such initiative which has been highlighted. Similarly, when I talk about some of the bottlenecks, well, high initial cost has been raised as one of the points for the miners that, okay, this is something which is affecting us big time to get into any such alternative.